I stared at the screen, my vision blurring as my pulse pounded in my ears. My wife's name was at the top of the chat, but the words weren't meant for me. Can't wait to see you again. Last time was insane. You make me forget everything. Every muscle in my body tensed. The messages kept coming. Each one worse than the last. A thread of conversations stretching back for months, jokes, secrets, intimate details she had never shared with me. And then, the pictures. I felt something snap inside me. Not just anger, something colder. Sharper. The phone almost slipped from my hands as I forced myself to keep scrolling. I needed more. More proof. More details. And that's when I found it. Their trip. The one she had told me was for work. The hotel booking. The time. The date. This weekend. A perfect little getaway. A perfect little lie. I inhaled sharply through my nose, forcing my breathing to slow. Every instinct in me screamed to wake her up, to shove the phone in her face and demand answers. To scream. To break something. But I didn't. Instead, I put the phone back exactly where I found it, turned off the light, and lay down beside her. I listened to her breathe, steady and slow, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. And in that moment, a plan began to form. I wasn't going to confront her now. No, that would be too easy. Too predictable. I was going to let her think she got away with it. And then, when she least expected it, I was going to rip her perfect little world apart. Emily had no idea. The next morning, I played my role perfectly. I kissed her on the cheek, made coffee like I always did, even joked about her big work trip. She smiled, touched my arm, and said she'd miss me. Miss me? I wanted to laugh in her face. Instead, I smiled back. Let her believe it. She left for work, and the second her car was out of sight, I moved. I had 2 days before she and her little boy toy left for their secret trip. That was all the time I needed. First, I called in sick. No distractions. Then I started digging. I already knew where they were going. She had booked the hotel under her name like an idiot. But I needed more. Who was this guy? How long had it been going on? Was he just some random fling, or was she planning something bigger? Her laptop was password protected. But her tablet? The one she used for Netflix and online shopping? Wide open. I found everything. Emails, flights, messages, and pictures. So many pictures. Them in bars, in a car, in our bed. Jesus Christ. I gripped the edge of the table, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't just some fling. This was deliberate. She had built an entire double life behind my back. I felt something in my chest tighten, rage, betrayal, the urge to throw the damn tablet across the room. But I swallowed it down. Not yet. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to be smart. So I kept digging. I found his name, his social media, his job. He was younger than me. Fit. One of those guys who probably spent more time in the gym than at work. And he had no idea what was coming. By the time Emily got home, I was calm. Controlled. I asked her what time she was leaving for her business trip. She gave me the details without hesitation. I kissed her goodnight. And while she slept, dreaming about the weekend of lies she thought she was about to have, I packed a bag. Because I wasn't staying home. I was going to. And when they walked right into the trap I was setting, their little fantasy would shatter. The airport was crowded, a sea of people moving in different directions, but my eyes were locked on one target. Emily. She stood near the check-in counter, laughing at something he had said. Him. The man she had chosen over me. He was taller than me, broader, with the kind of effortless confidence that made people stop and listen when he spoke. He wore a crisp button-down, sleeves rolled up, one hand casually resting on the handle of his suitcase. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look like a man sneaking off with someone else's wife. Emily leaned into him, her hand brushing his arm as she whispered something in his ear. He smirked. She giggled. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. I had followed them from the house, watching as she kissed me goodbye that morning, a long, slow kiss as if nothing was wrong, before slipping into an Uber just a block away. I stayed on their trail, keeping my distance, heart hammering as I watched her laugh with him in the back seat. How many times had she done this? How many mornings had I kissed her, clueless, while she was already counting down the hours until she was in his arms? I checked my watch. 3 minutes. The trap was set. Emily took out her phone and tapped the screen. A second later, my pocket buzzed. Emily just landed. Meetings all day. Love you. I exhaled slowly, forcing down the bitter laugh threatening to escape. Lying. So easily. So naturally. I stepped forward, weaving through the crowd, my heartbeat steady now. Controlled. Ready. I moved closer, close enough to hear their conversation. I told you he's clueless, Emily said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. This is too easy. I stopped. Something inside me snapped. I was done watching. Done waiting. The moment her name was called over the intercom, she turned, reaching for her suitcase, and then she saw me. Her entire body froze. Her face drained of color. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I wanted her to feel what I had felt. That cold, sinking dread. That realization that everything was about to collapse. She opened her mouth. No words came out. Her lover looked between us, confused. Emily? Who is? And that's when her phone rang. She flinched like the sound had physically struck her. I didn't have to look at the screen to know what it said. Incoming call, husband. And just like that, the game was over. Emily fumbled with her phone like it was a live grenade. Her fingers trembled as she declined my call, but the damage was already done. The moment she saw me, she knew. Her lover turned toward me, brow furrowed. Who the hell is this? I smiled, slow and deliberate. Oh, that's a great question. Why don't you answer, Emily? She swallowed hard. Her eyes darted around like a trapped animal looking for an escape. I can explain. Explain what? I stepped closer, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the airport noise. That you've been screwing this guy behind my back? That you lied straight to my face this morning? Or that you thought you were smart enough to get away with it? Her lover took a step forward, his posture shifting. Defensive. All right, man, I don't know what's going on, but you need to. I turned to him so fast he actually took a step back. Oh, you don't know what's going on? You mean you didn't know she was married? I let the words sink in before tilting my head. Or did you just not care? Emily reached for my arm, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, not here. Let's just talk. I yanked my arm away. The disgust in my voice surprised even me. Now you want to talk? Now that you got caught? Her face twisted in frustration. The panic was still there, but something else was creeping in anger. Like I was the one in the wrong. Like I had no right to call her out. Her lover exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Look, man, I didn't sign up for. I cut him off. I don't give a damn what you signed up for. I stepped even closer, lowering my voice just for them. But you? You signed up to be my wife. I turned to Emily, watching her eyes widen. And you threw that away like it was nothing. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Emily exhaled sharply, her mask slipping. You're making a scene, she hissed under her breath. Let's go somewhere private, I laughed. Laughed. The sound was bitter, sharp, ugly. Oh, now you care about privacy? That's rich. Coming from the woman who was about to let another man take her to a hotel bed. Her lips parted. But before she could get another lie out, I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Her voice crystal clear, unmistakable. I told you he's clueless. This is too easy. The moment she heard her own words, she flinched like I had hit her. The color drained from her face. Her lover went still. Wait, what the hell? I let the recording keep playing. Let her hear her own voice mocking me. Let him hear exactly what kind of woman he had been sleeping with. People around us were starting to notice. Heads turning. Conversations pausing. Emily snapped. Her mask shattered completely, and she turned on me, eyes burning with fury. You set me up? I smirked. You walked right into it. She looked around, realizing she had nowhere to go. People were watching. Her lover was watching. Everything was crumbling, and she knew it. And then she did something that almost made me laugh again. She looked at him, desperate, pleading, as if he would somehow save her from the wreckage. But the way he was looking at her now, like she was toxic, like she was radioactive. He took a slow step back. You're on your own. And just like that, he turned. Walked away. Emily let out a strangled breath, watching him disappear into the crowd. Her hands curled into fists before she whirled back to me, voice shaking with rage. You bastard. I tilted my head. Says the cheater. Her nostrils flared. You think you won? I smiled. Oh, Emily, you have no idea. And then I dropped the real bomb. The papers. I pulled them out of my jacket and let them unfold in front of her. Her eyes darted across the page. Divorce. My name signed at the bottom. Everything already in motion. Her breath hitched. I leaned in, my voice quiet but firm. You made this easy. And then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there alone. I didn't look back. Not when I heard her sharp inhale. Not when she muttered something under her breath, voice thick with rage. Not even when she called out my name once, then twice, then louder. I kept walking. The rush of adrenaline in my veins hadn't faded. My heartbeat was steady, but my mind was burning. This wasn't over. Not yet. I made my way through the terminal, ignoring the stares from the people who had witnessed it all. Some whispered. Some just watched, fascinated by the real-life train wreck that had just unfolded in front of them. I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them remember her face when she realized I had outplayed her. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, pulling out my phone. One missed call from Emily. A text right after. Emily, you're overreacting. We need to talk. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. Even now, even after being caught red-handed, she still thought she could control the narrative. I slid into the back seat of a cab and gave the driver my address. The moment the car pulled away, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Emily, you're seriously leaving like this? I turned the screen off. She wasn't worth a response. I leaned back, eyes on the blurred city lights passing by. She had no idea how deep this went. Because while she had been busy sneaking around behind my back, I had been busy too. This wasn't just about exposing her. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. This was about making sure she lost everything. I had spent the past week preparing for this moment. The divorce papers weren't just a threat, they were real, signed, and strategically executed. The house? Mine. The joint accounts? Already separated. And her job? She should have been more careful. Because when I checked her messages that night, I didn't just find proof of the affair, I found something else. Something far more useful. Messages between her and her boss. Documents she had no business having. Emails discussing things that, if exposed, would leave both of them in deep, irreversible trouble. And guess who had copies? I smiled to myself. The moment she landed back home, she'd walk straight into a nightmare of her own making. I could almost picture her face when she realized. She had destroyed my life without a second thought. Now it was my turn. I got home before she did. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin and reminds you that something is about to break. I stood in the doorway for a second, breathing it in. This place, the home we had built together, felt different now. It wasn't ours anymore. It was mine. I moved through the house, my steps slow, deliberate. I had already taken what I needed. The important documents, my valuables, anything that mattered to me. The rest? She could walk into an empty shell for all I cared. I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch, waiting. And then the front door burst open. Emily stormed in, her suitcase banging against the floor as she tossed it aside. She was breathing hard, hair a mess, her eyes burning with fury. You, she seethed. I took a slow sip of my drink, unfazed. Me. Her hands clenched into fists. You humiliated me. I raised a brow. You mean you humiliated yourself? Her jaw tightened. You set me up. I let out a sharp laugh. No, Emily. You set yourself up the moment you decided to sneak around like a damn teenager. I just let you walk into it. She took a step closer, shaking her head. You think this is funny? You think you're the victim here? I exhaled, setting my glass down. Oh, I don't think I'm the victim. I know I am. I tilted my head. But the difference between you and me? I don't play the victim. I play to win. Her expression flickered just for a second, but I caught it. That moment of hesitation. That fear creeping in. She knew. She felt it. This wasn't just a fight. This was something else. Something bigger. She tried to regain control, crossing her arms, her lips curling into that familiar smirk, the same one she used when she thought she was the smartest person in the room. Fine. You got your little revenge moment at the airport. What now? You think you're gonna walk away clean? We built this life together. You don't get to just throw me out like I'm nothing. I smiled. Oh, she had no idea. I reached into my pocket, pulled out an envelope and tossed it onto the coffee table. She eyed it warily before snatching it up. As soon as she saw the contents, her face paled. She flipped through the papers in disbelief. Bank statements. Property transfers. Legal documents. Her voice wavered. What is this? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. It means as of 5 days ago, everything we built together is legally mine. She swallowed hard. You know, this isn't possible. I would have known, I chuckled. Would you? You were too busy screwing your little side piece to notice what was happening right under your nose. Her breathing picked up. No. No. You can't just, oh, but I did. I met her eyes, my voice deadly calm. You lied. You betrayed me. You made a fool out of me. But the difference between us? I don't just react, I plan. She stared at me, realization hitting her like a freight train. This wasn't just about catching her. This wasn't just about exposing her. This was about destroying her. I stood up, towering over her as I delivered the final blow. You lost, Emily. And from the way her breath hitched, I knew, for the first time in her life, she understood what it felt like to be powerless. Emily's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers again. Her eyes darting back and forth like she could somehow rewrite the words just by looking at them long enough. She was still trying to find a way out. Still trying to control the situation. But there was no way out. Not this time. Her voice was uneven when she finally spoke. You can't do this. You don't have the right. I laughed, slow and deliberate. I don't have the right? Emily, you signed half of this yourself. You just didn't bother reading what you were signing. She blinked rapidly, her mouth slightly open. It hit her then. All those times she had signed joint financial papers, all those times I had asked her to review something, all those little moments where she had been too distracted by her perfect little affair to notice the fine print. She had given me exactly what I needed, and now she was realizing it. She shook her head, as if trying to physically reject the reality in front of her. No, you're lying. This isn't legal. Oh, it's very legal. I cut in, my voice sharp. Had a lawyer go over everything. Twice. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked around the house. Our house. The house she thought she was coming back to. Her breathing picked up. Panic. That's when I saw the shift, the moment she decided that if she couldn't get out of this with logic, she'd manipulate her way out. It was what she did best. Her lips parted, and just like that, the anger disappeared. She softened. Her shoulders dropped, and she took a small step forward, her voice quieter now. Almost pleading. Baby, listen. We don't have to do this like this. I almost laughed in her face. Unbelievable. She reached for my arm, her touch light. I know I hurt you, but we were happy before. We can fix this. I pulled away before she could finish. Fix this. I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue like they were foreign. You don't want to fix this. You just don't want to lose. Her face twitched. Just for a second. She had been caught again. Emily had never loved me. Not really. She had loved the life I gave her, the security, the comfort. And now, piece by piece, she was watching it slip through her fingers. She tried again. Please, she whispered, eyes glassy now. Fake tears. A last-ditch effort. You're angry right now. You're hurt. But you don't want to throw away everything we've built. We can talk about this. We can go to therapy. Just, don't do this. I stared at her. And then I did something she never expected. I smiled. But there was nothing warm about it. Oh, Emily, I said, voice dripping with amusement. You think I'm hurt? I leaned in, dropping my tone to a whisper. I'm not hurt. I'm free. Her breath caught in her throat. That's when I knew she finally understood. She hadn't broken me. She had unleashed me. And she wasn't getting a second chance. Emily stood there, completely still, as if her brain had short-circuited. The tears that had started pooling in her eyes weren't real sadness. They were the kind of tears a person sheds when they realize they have finally lost. When every door slams shut and there's no escape route left. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe another lie, maybe another excuse, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. Wait, she spun around, voice sharp, desperate. You can't just walk out like this. You don't get to decide how this ends. I paused, turning my head slightly. That's where you're wrong. I opened the door, stepped outside, and just before I shut it behind me, I heard it. That scream. Raw. Unfiltered rage. She had finally cracked. I could picture it perfectly, the way she probably threw something across the room, the way she stood there, seething, realizing she had played herself into nothing. And it was glorious. I didn't rush. I walked down the driveway with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. The weight was gone. The humiliation, the betrayal, the constant second-guessing, all of it was over. I had won. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and as I pulled onto the road, my phone buzzed. Emily. I ignored it. A second later, another buzz. This time a text. Emily, you think this is over? You think you can just erase me? You have no idea who you're messing with. I chuckled. Of course. Of course she couldn't accept defeat. But that was the thing about people like Emily. They never saw it coming until it was too late. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, rolling down the window as the cool night air rushed in. Let her scream. Let her threaten. It didn't matter. Because by the time she realized just how deep I had buried her, she'd already be gone. I didn't hear from Emily for 2 days. Not a single call. Not a single text. Not even some pathetic attempt to twist the story to mutual friends. And that's how I knew she wasn't done. Emily wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was the type to regroup, rethink, and strike when she thought the time was right. The only problem for her? I was already 10 steps ahead. On the 3rd day, I got the call. Not from Emily. From her boss. Mr. Carter. His voice was tight, controlled. But I could hear the tension underneath. I assume you know why I'm calling. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. I have a few guesses. A long silence. Then, clipped and precise, what do you want? There it was. See, Emily's biggest mistake wasn't just cheating. It was being sloppy. The night I found out, I didn't just discover her affair. I found the emails, the confidential documents she had been sending, The little side deals she had no business making. And I had saved everything. Screenshots, PDFs, backups, evidence. I could have gone public. I could have ruined her and her boss in one spectacular explosion. But where was the fun in that? I wanted to watch them squirm. I tapped my fingers against my desk. That depends, I said smoothly. What are you offering? Another silence. I imagined him sitting there, sweating, realizing just how badly he had underestimated me. She's already out, he said finally. Effective immediately. No recommendations. I smirked. Good start. You will delete everything you have, he continued, his voice turning harder. And this doesn't go any further. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to wonder if I would say no. Then finally I said, pleasure doing business with you. And I hung up. Emily was done. Officially. No career. No backup plan. No safety net. I sat back, exhaling slowly. I should have felt something, pity, regret, maybe even relief. But all I felt was satisfaction. She had taken everything I had built and tried to burn it down. So I had done the same to her. Only difference? I had done it better. I didn't hear from Emily for another week. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. And then, just when I thought she had finally accepted defeat, she showed up. At my door. It was late, almost midnight. The kind of hour where unexpected knocks send a chill down your spine. When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to see her standing there. But I was surprised by how she looked. Her hair was a mess. Makeup smudged like she had been crying or drinking, or both. She wasn't dressed like the woman who used to smirk at me from across dinner tables, the woman who used to walk with that untouchable confidence. She looked small, but I knew better than to fall for it. She lifted her chin, trying to summon whatever arrogance she had left. Congratulations, she said bitterly. You won. I crossed my arms. Took you long enough to figure that out. She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. You didn't have to ruin my life. I laughed. A deep, genuine, satisfied laugh. That's rich, coming from you. She took a step forward. I made a mistake. Terrible mistake. But you. She swallowed hard, eyes flickering with something desperate. You destroyed me. I tilted my head. Did I? I stepped closer, watching her flinch. Or did you destroy yourself and I just let it happen? She clenched her jaw, nostrils flaring. I loved you. I felt my lips curl into a slow, humorless smile. No, Emily. You loved having me. You loved knowing I'd always be there no matter how many lies you told. No matter how many times I let out a sharp breath. You never loved me. You loved control. And now that it's gone, you don't know who you were without it. Her eyes shone with fresh tears, but I didn't care. Not anymore. She tried again, voice cracking. You don't even miss me? I stared at her. Took in the wreckage of the woman who had once stood so high above me, convinced I'd never find out, convinced I'd never fight back. And then, with a calmness that sent her reeling, I said no. Her breath hitched. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. She turned, walking away with slow, stiff steps as if her body hadn't fully accepted the loss yet. She reached the sidewalk, hesitated, one last chance to turn back, to try one more trick. She didn't. She got into her car. Drove away. And as I stood there, watching her disappear into the night, I felt nothing but peace. No anger. No sadness. No regrets. Because for the first time in years, I was finally free.